Hey, Dennis O'Brien back again on Let's Talk About It without Susan Johnson. Susan Johnson could not make it today. She's out in the community doing good works. You know, every once in a while I take a day off for doing good works, and this is her turn. But I'm here. I've got a great show for you tonight. I have Judge John McGrath of the Wyndham Colchester Probate Court, which covers which towns, John?
Wyndham, Colchester, Scotland, Chaplin, Lebanon,
Hampton.
and Hampton. Thank
Okay,
you.
I put pressure on him.
Yes,
Yeah,
right out
Hampton's
of the box.
right out of the box. You know, you got to wake them up. We try to wake up the guests. Actually, got to wake up the host. But anyway, John succeeded me in 2011 as probate judge, mostly here in Wyndham. But you know, we had done a consolidation of courts as I was leaving, and I supported it big time because I thought it was necessary. So Judge McGrath has a much bigger court than I have in terms of the number of towns, anyway. And he's also, as I was, the administrative judge of the children's court,
Correct.
and that's a lot of responsibility.
And big news in the children's court world. You want to hear it?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
All right. Yeah, we are weeks away from moving the Willimantic. We actually call it the Northeast Regional Children's Probate Court. I've had to sign a lot of papers in the last couple of weeks, and it's NERCPC Children's Court, moving to the end of Tucky Road, Route 6, right at the Route 6 interchange there on the Tucky Road and the Thomas Crossan building complex. And we've got a new court opening up there right after Labor Day, moving everything down from Putnam. So all of our court staff will be in one location. I think it's a nice centralized location. A district for the children's court goes from Tolland all the way to Plainfield and up to Thompson. So it's a very big district. And, one thing you learn practicing law out here is you got to drive if you're going to go to court. You know, you end up going to court in Tolland, or you go to court in Norwich, you go to court in Putnam. It's not easy, especially without a car. It's not easy. So we're on a bus line. There's a bus shelter there. I hear it's one of the last bus shelters before we're getting new bus shelters. But I think it'll be convenient, and we'll have more room, and all the staff will be together. And I forgot to mention this the other day, and the building stays on the Wyndham tax rolls.
One of the reasons I wanted to have John McGrath on, the judge, is because I also served as judge. I didn't stay as long as you have, John. You've been there longer than I have now. I was 12 years there.
Yeah, and I'm close to 15, I think.
Yeah, you're going to be, by the time you finish in, what, June next year?
June of next year, right.
Okay, because, both of us took this job on when we were not, real old, but we were not young, really young. John was younger than I was. But anyway, I served as judge from 1999, January, till I think it was January 2011. And that's when John took over, and I moved on to other things. But I got to say, it was the most fulfilling job I have ever had in terms of doing things to help people.
Yeah, I agree, Dennis. I've been a lawyer for 35 years, and I started working with you in legal services many, many years ago when we actually were young, and worked there before doing other things. But I think you mentioned it to me early today, and I've been thinking about it. We pretty much, all of us, there's a few exceptions, but all of us end up needing the probate court, not necessarily the children's court, but the probate court system that we have sometime during our life. And yesterday I was involved in two very intense conservator hearings in Colchester at the nursing home. And there's a lot of family there. It's a very tense situation. It's making big decisions about where elderly people can live. Do they have to move out of their house? Should their house be sold? And, they're very big questions and very difficult things for people to have to deal with. So that's the kind of thing you get involved in. I'm in court 4 days a week.
Yeah, I think, it takes somebody with a big heart, a good-hearted judge. You got to have a good-hearted judge, because the people who come to us, except for an adoption, when everybody's happy and they bring balloons in, they are looking they need a tender loving care, because they're going through something that's not very much fun.
Yeah, and you know, you don't have we don't have crystal balls. We don't know what our future, what's going to be coming down the road for us. And so, we may think, oh, we'll never be in a nursing home. Well, you can say that, but whether that ends up being true or not, we don't know. So the thing is, we got to deal with those issues when they come up. Sometimes they come up very quickly. Other times it sort of builds over time. We have 3 nursing homes in the Wyndham community, from Douglas Manor out in Wyndham to St. Joseph Living Center. I'm coming down the road there. And then over to Vanderman Place, which is behind Stop and Shop and next to Wyndham Hospital. So there's 3 nursing homes here with a lot of people, and there's 2 very active nursing homes in Colchester. So it's 5 nursing homes in our district alone.
Yeah, I mean, when I was judge, I had 3 only, because I was just in Wyndham and Scotland, which doesn't have one. But I'll tell you what, I would say I was in, one week I'd be in one, next week 2. I mean, it was in nursing homes a lot, dealing with conservatorships mainly.
Yep.
And that was before the law on conservatorships changed near the end of my tour of duty. And it is a big deal. And I'd go in there, and you talk about, you don't know what's going to happen. And I would talk to people in their nursing home rooms, and they'd look at me in the eye and say, "Judge, I really don't want to be here." And some of them were my age, or even younger. And I would think to myself, there but for the grace of God go I. That could be me. And I'm still at large, but I'm over 80. And, it is something that could happen to anybody. You could have a stroke, or any kind of a mishap, or just a general, deterioration of the mind. And it's a sad situation, and it requires a judge that it knows how to deal with it with, as I said before, tender loving care. I know when I was about to leave the court in 2011, well, it was in 2010. Actually, I knew I was going, because I wasn't going to run for re-election in 2010, and I knew there was only one person I knew that was the right person to succeed me, and that was John McGrath. John and I, as John said, we had worked together in legal services for a few years, knew each other quite well, and the legal aid people generally are caring people. In order to be a good legal aid lawyer, you have to care about people. You can't be a selfish person. You have to be somebody who has empathy and sympathy and all that. And that's what it requires. And one of the reasons I wanted to have John on is because, we've got John is going to be replaced, and they're replacing him early. He doesn't have to leave early, but they're deciding who is going to replace him. And there's a Democratic Party primary going on in John's district, which is 6 towns, and one of them is Wyndham. And this is the first year they've had extensive early voting, and it started this past Monday, and it's going through all the way through Sunday, and the primary day is next Tuesday, the 13th. So I thought I wanted people to understand how it's important to vote in the primary, because it's very important who the probate judge is. It is an important position. The probate court is an important court. I am still, as a graduate of the probate system. It's like, when the old timers come back for the old timers game in baseball. I feel I'm just totally dedicated to the probate court. When I got into it, I had no idea how important it was, and John did, because John McGrath did a lot of work in the probate court when I was judge. You had a lot of experience. Mm-hmm. I didn't come to the probate court with much experience at all in probate. I think I handled one case, but I did have a lot of experience as a lawyer, but not as a probate judge. And my expectations were that it was the court that handled cases when people have passed away, and that was it. And it's a lot more than that. We're going to talk about some of those things today. But it's a very important local institution, and for the people who have to use it, and as Judge McGrath said, most everybody sooner or later will be involved in it in some way, shape, or other. At least every family, and it does so many different things. And we talked about conservatorship. John, you want to talk a little bit about that? I mean, that's really that can be a very complex and put an incredible strain on a family and on the person who is, might be put under conservator.
Yeah, a conservatorship, and here's a little trivia for you. Sometimes you can tell if somebody's from the South or somebody's from the North by how they pronounce that name, the title for somebody who serves in that role. And so down south they say, up here we say conservator, and down there they say conservator. So it's like tomato and tomato, but it's the same role. And what that role is very, very carefully described in our statutes. And it is somebody who is appointed by a court to basically act on your behalf and to do what's the best for you, or to follow your directions if you are telling somebody what you want. And so it's often somebody who is a family member, if that's possible. Sometimes it's your spouse or one of your children. But many people don't have family who can do this. So in those cases, we have conservators who are approved by the probate court system, and they are appointed. We call them professional conservators. They are paid either by the person who's conserved, or they're paid by the state of Connecticut if that person doesn't have money. And in every conservator, every involuntary conservator, the court appoints an attorney to represent the conserved person. So somebody can't, and this is something that happens in other states, somebody ends up finding out that they've been conserved and they haven't been to a court hearing, don't have a lawyer, they feel isolated, and it's a really bad situation. So our system here is much more, we have to have a hearing. I insist on the person either being at the hearing or I go see the person. So I go to the nursing home, I go to the hospital. I was down in at Gaylord the other day. I was in New Britain for the Hospital for Special Care. You sometimes have to go where the person is because it's very difficult for that person to come to the court. And I frankly don't think that you're doing justice for people if you don't have that person either at the courtroom, if possible, or you go to them. But you can't just say, well, so-and-so says that person doesn't mind having a conservator. I mean, you want to hear that for yourself. You want to meet the person and see, do they have the capacity to make that decision. So conservators can be anybody who's 18 years old to 100 to 81.
Or more.
Anybody can have a conservator, can apply to become the conservator or to have a conservator appointed for somebody who can't manage his or her own affairs. And one example, and then I'll turn it back to Dennis, is somebody who's being exploited. You could have an elderly person, somebody comes in to help that person out. All of a sudden, one of the family members realizes that there's money coming out of Dad's savings account. The Dad's going to the ATM and taking $500 a week out. We don't know where that money's going. And that's a very classic example of the exploitation that some of our elderly are subject to, and that's a big concern. So conservators can, they're overseen by the court. They have to report to the court what they're doing. They have to file an accounting with the court. So there's much more oversight than just, I'm helping Dennis out and I'm just, doing this or that. It doesn't work that way. It's very regulated.
It's very regulated, and the state system takes great care, as John has said, to make sure that the person's rights are respected. I would say that it's, I'm into constitutional law. Judge McGrath understands constitutional law very well. Anybody who's worked in legal aid with low-income people knows that. This is called due process of law. And this is our version of due process of law, which is really, really very good in terms of protecting the rights of anybody who needs to be protected. And our courts are, we had when I started as judge in 1999, there were a lot of judges that were not lawyers, and and some of the judges that we had that were not lawyers were terrific, but the one concern I had, and I was the administrative judge for the children's court when it started, and I had to some extent responsibility for training the judges that were the rest of the judges in the district, of which there were 13 or 14, I think, at the time, and a lot of them were non-lawyers, and they were really good. But I really think it's really important, especially in a situation like a conservatorship, and there are others as well, for judges to understand the Constitution of the United States. And that's something, I deal with now as a town attorney. I was just on the phone this afternoon with this very smart guy talking about his interpretation of the Connecticut General Statutes regarding municipalities in some respect, but I had to tell him, I said, you got a constitutional question there. I said, and that's different. And you really, you really ought to listen to what I have to say to you, because I'm experienced in that regard. But, the United States system of justice, when it works properly, ensures that everybody's rights are protected, that everybody has a chance, everybody is treated fairly and equitably, and you can't go anywhere other than the probate court. That exceeds that kind of protection for people who are in need. And I call it, I'm not the first one to say this. It was told to me when I became a probate judge that it is a user-friendly court. And it is now, it exceeds what it was when I was there, because you have more protections now than ever for people in these situations. And so the probate court is getting better all the time. And, it's been in place for 300 years right here in Windham. And so with all that experience, we've had a lot of time to perfect it. Mm-hmm. And it is really a great court. And folks, if you're a Democrat and you get a chance to go to Town Hall in Windham between now and the end of about 6 o'clock on Sunday, you can vote early in the Democratic Party primary for probate judge, or you can vote on Tuesday in the primary day, where the usual polls at the VFW, at the Windham Center Firehouse, and at the Elks Club on Pleasant Street will be open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. So any Democrat can vote, and I'm recommending, because I love the probate court, and I want everybody to vote all the time. People should vote. And in this election, only Democrats can vote. But for probate judge, there's a Republican primary going on as well. I think there's a primary for a U.S. Senate position on the Republican ticket, challenging Senator Murphy, and I think there's also a Republican primary for a state Senate in the 29th district. But,
Dennis, if I could just jump in, I want to make it clear, just because you're talking about the election, that A, I am not running for any position, and B, I'm not endorsing any candidate. We have judicial ethics rules. All probate judges, all 54 of us, are required to follow these rules, and those running for office are required to follow the rules. But one very important rule is you cannot, if you're a judge, endorse anybody for another elected position. So I cannot publicly endorse a candidate for probate court or a candidate for U.S. Senate. Not that they're asking for it, but I can't do it. And it's we talk about ethics a lot in the court system, and there is a very clear set of rules, and they're written down, and all the judges have a copy of them, and we're held to those rules. So Dennis is talking about the system, but he's not saying, McGrath endorses anybody. That's why, because I'm not allowed to.
John is adheres to those rules very strictly, always has, And if I didn't, when I asked him to come on the show, I said, we're not going to talk about any of the candidates on the show, and we're not. I just want. I'm not restricted in that way, but I am restricted today because I don't want to do that in the presence of the sitting judge, who is, under those restrictions. So, but I just think people ought to vote, and that means everywhere, in Chaplin, in Scotland, in Hampton, in Lebanon, in Wyndham, and in Colchester. So everybody should vote.
I
All
agree.
Democrats are urged by me, Dennis O'Brien, former probate judge, retired from 2011, and well replaced by this gentleman right here. I'm just saying, I think you should vote. That's
Yeah,
it.
and I agree. I agree 100% with Dennis. And my wife and I voted this afternoon, and it's great. It's a very low sort of tension. You go in, you do the new paperwork, the new system. It's great. So I encourage you, if you have time, it's going to rain tomorrow. Go to the second floor of the Wyndham Town Hall, if you're a resident of Wyndham, and they'll take care of you.
I don't want to skip over. You mentioned the children's court. I don't want to skip over the children's court because when I was judge, and you mentioned how you had to sign a lot of papers to move the court out to Tucky Road. Well, I had to do the same thing when it opened up, because I worked with Judge Lawler, who was the administrative judge for the whole system, and he came out here, and we were going to rent quarters at the mills, and that fell through. So we ended up renting quarters from the Turkington brothers over on South Park Street, in the old Electromotive, and we had 2 minutes for.
2 minutes till the break.
Till the break. Okay, you're not saying the show's over.
No, sir.
Matt Rupar's here. He always comes in and lets me know. He tells me what to do, and when I don't do it, he gives me the fisheye with a smile. He's he's a kind of smiley kind of guy, and he does a wonderful job to keep all these evening shows going.
Thank you.
And I think it's a real feature of WILI, and I naturally would, because I do one of them, to have the shows on every evening. I think from 4 to 6, pretty much 4 to 6, and that's a great thing for the people of this area, to be able to listen to all different kinds of shows on WILI, AM and FM, every weekday evening from 4 to 6. I'm real proud of I'm proud of being a former probate judge. I'm also proud of being a commentator on WILI. But the probate court comes first in my heart, next to my wife, of course. Okay, so anyway, and of course Leslie O'Brien. Anyway, we're going to take a break right now. We're going to hear from our sponsors, and before I let us go to the break, I got to thank the Gates family, who have supported this show for 25 years. They've sponsored us for all that time, Craig and Denny, and we couldn't do this show without Matt Rupar or the Gates people, and I'm so thankful for the support they give us. We'll be right back. Dennis O'Brien back on Let's Talk About It with Judge John McGrath, the probate judge of probate for the District of Wyndham and Colchester. And I got to tell you, John, when they set up the districts, I had a lot to say about what happened, because I was the judge in Wyndham, which was the biggest town in the district, as you know, population-wise anyway. And they wanted to go alphabetically, and they wanted to call it Colchester/Wyndham. I said, no. I said, can't do that. I said, this court in Wyndham is the third oldest court in the state. It's over 300 years old. Tony Clark, the late, great Tony Clark, had brought me some newspaper articles about it that appeared in the Chronicle probably 100 years ago from now, and talked about it and how, as you know, Hampton and I think Scotland were certainly part of Wyndham at one time, and part of Chaplin. Chaplin was put together from Mansfield, Wyndham, and I don't know, probably Mansfield and Wyndham mostly.
Yeah, I'm not sure the history of that, but maybe a piece of Mansfield got stuck in there too.
Oh yeah, Mansfield did. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the Wyndham Probate Court.
No, in the
Chaffin.
configuring of these towns, like
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
and
I think so.
but the nice thing about our district is we have these three small towns, Chaplin, Hampton, Scotland,
Right.
that you know they would get swallowed up by a big court district. We have
Oh yes.
25,000 people in our court district. I mean, no, I'm sorry, 25,000 people in Wyndham, and so we have just over 50,000 in our whole district.
Right.
And I think the rule, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the rule when you created the districts was you had to have a minimum of 50,000 people, and you had to have all of the towns contiguous with each other that were going to form a district. So it was like a puzzle.
It was. That's
A
exactly
very
right.
difficult puzzle.
And as a somebody who likes to jump in on everything, I remember copying the map of Connecticut with all the towns designated, and I had a color guide. I created my own map, my own proposal, that I submitted to probate administration, and it was to Judge Lawler. I think it was Judge Lawler. Yes, it was. Wait a minute, it might have been Judge Knierim, but I think it was Judge Lawler. But I submitted that. I think the idea of consolidating courts came up a lot earlier than it actually happened, and it was being discussed at the probate assembly, and I had my own. I had all kinds of different proposals and modified them, and it ended up being what it is. And you're right. Every town had to be contiguous, nothing floating out there in space,
Right.
which would not be good. And I think they did a pretty good job. And I think it was something, because I was in touch with Rick Green, who was a reporter for the Current, and he was very much interested in the probate courts, and as a critic. And I think by the time I finished with him, he sat in his chair a few times. I had him on the show, and I told him, I said, the probate court is a great institution, and gave him a lot of case histories and stuff that had happened not only here but in other courts that I had heard about in the assembly. And I think by the time he finished, he realized that he was dealing with a really good institution, and it is. It's a great institution, folks, and I'm very proud to have been a part of it, as you are, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's interesting. A couple more things about the clientele, the people that the court serves. First of all, if you've been in probate court, you might wonder, why don't judges in probate court wear robes? And so we don't wear robes, and we don't wear what they call in the rule book judicial costumes. So when the British allowed the probate court system to be established, so that was before 1776, before there were any courts, the British had allowed probate courts to be established to take care of just a certain type of legal matter. And we, as judges back then, were not allowed to wear robes, or from looking at the movies that in England there's wigs and all kinds of costumes. No costumes. You wear your work clothes to court. You wear your suit or something nice, and it takes that kind of atmosphere, changes the atmosphere a little bit. I think it makes it more approachable and relaxed. But it's still a court, and I have to keep emphasizing that. Even though I'm not wearing a robe, it's still a court, and most people respect courts. Although, with the world of Judge Judy, people expect like a lot of yelling and emotional give and take, which happens because people get very worked up.
Well, we're making decisions in those courts that affect them, and can affect them in a great way.
Yeah.
And we're coming on. We're not sitting on an elevated bench. We're sitting at the same level they are. I used to tell people, guys especially, would stand up and start talking to me in a very intense way, and I'd say, "Please sit down. You're going to stay on my level. I don't want anybody up above me." I said, I want to stay on your level. We're all on the same level here, and I respect you. I I expect you to respect me. And it worked most of the time, but every once in a while, I think it's probably more difficult today. I think politics and behavior in general, since the advent of the internet, has gotten more difficult to keep, for people to be more, let's say, civilized. I think there was a law professor from Yale, Stephen Clark, I believe, that wrote a book on civility about 20 years ago that I read, and it was marvelous. Civility is so important. We cannot have a democratic small d society work without civility. And so I think the probate court is a model of civility. The judges, the judges I've known have all been real gentlemen and gentlewomen, and I have now, when I first left the court, it was hard for me to go back into the court, because when you're a judge in the court, you feel, you have more control over the situation. And when you go in as a lawyer, you don't. You're an advocate. And for a while, I didn't go back into the probate court. But, after a while, people would come to me with cases that, somebody said, go to Dennis O'Brien. He used to be the judge. He can do this. This is a difficult case. And so I took on some cases, and I went back into Judge McGrath's court. I went to other courts around the area. And I'll tell you what, I was treated just like I expect to be treated as an attorney in the courtroom, with lots of respect and dignity. And I thought that the courts were, in every case I've ever been in, whether the judge is a Republican, Democrat, Green Party, or whatever, it was just very, very equitable and fair. And I can't, again, I want to stress the importance of the probate court. It's a very important institution, and I suppose it would be nice to live your entire life and not have to use the probate court, because sometimes, most of the time when you go in there, you've got a problem. But or probably the Superior Court as well. Yeah. Those problems can be a lot worse, but it depends. But
Dennis, I'm sure you've heard this, and I hear it advertising on the radio or TV, and they say, avoid probate in the newspaper, avoid probate. And I say to people all the time, I said, that is so misleading, because why? It's hard to avoid probate, but why avoid probate when probate can actually help? It can safeguard things in your world or your children's or your parents. It provides oversight. And you say, they take our money. There's a fee for using the probate court. That's how probate court is funded in part. Is you file something and you pay a fee. The court doesn't take your money, and it creates a really important environment to resolve differences. Sometimes it just takes a judge to kind of get parties to talk a little bit, come up with an agreement. If you don't come up with an agreement, then the court needs to make a decision. But anyways, that avoid probate always bothers me.
Bothered me as well, and I can tell you that my experience was that the probate fees are not that much. They're really, really inexpensive, and I can't remember anybody, and maybe my memory is not as good as it used to be, but I can't remember anybody in the 12 years that I was in there when they got a bill who came in and complained about it. I just can't. Because they're getting a service, and I think if you hire a lawyer for a case, and you shouldn't really, unless it's a big money case, I think, or you're entitled to a lawyer, when somebody's going to take when there's a possibility your rights will be taken away, like conservatorship. But most people who are under possibility of conservatorship, a lot of them do not have enough funds to hire a lawyer themselves, and a lawyer will be appointed for a good lawyer will be appointed for them, but it's mostly in the decedent cases that people sometimes hire lawyers when they really don't need them, and not in my opinion anyway. It's not that the clerks will help you. They can't give you legal advice, but they will help you to fill out the forms and stuff. And again, once again, it's a user-friendly court, and I think the Superior Court has gotten more user-friendly because now they have an office where you can go
Yeah.
and ask questions. When I started practicing, and even when you started practicing, they didn't have that.
No, we always used to refer to persons who acted on their own behalf without lawyers as pro se. Pro se.
Yeah,
Now we refer to people who don't have lawyers as self-represented parties,
right.
and there's a lot more material and pre-printed forms, and it's a lot easier than it used to be.
Yes, it is, and I'm glad you mentioned those forms. If you go on the Connecticut Probate Court website, there are manuals, user manuals, for if you have a decedent's estate, if you have a conservatorship case, if you have even I think you one of the cases you do that I think a lot of people don't know about, Judge McGrath, are cases involving people who are developmentally disabled, and there's a manual for that as well.
Yeah, I made it a point when I started to visit every person who has intellectual disability who resides in our district, and we have a hearing. Every single one of them has a lawyer, and we have a hearing either at the court, or if they're not comfortable coming to the court, we go to the group home. And I've done that. We've covered every single person in the district, and then we see them every 3 years.
Yeah, I remember doing those cases, and I learned an awful lot about developmental disabilities, and I learned about the people who care for them, and most people are just wonderful, and the relatives and everything, and that was another thing that I felt was a very important part of my job as a probate judge. Another thing that makes the probate court very important to our community.
Yeah, and we have, as a community that were in the old days, a lot of people worked at Mansfield Training School, and so we have a lot of group homes that originated with people who left the training schools and moved into the communities, and the whole system changed, and with it the responsibilities. So the oversight the court has for those individuals is really important.
Yeah, I mean, we're supposed to review the case, as you pointed out, periodically, and try to determine whether the care that's being provided is adequate and is being done, and that's an important role. I'd say I always consider that very important. I know you do, and that's another thing the probate court does. And like I said, I wanted to talk a little bit about the children's court, child protection. Okay, this is something that was near and dear to me. And as the initial administrative judge for the children's court, and now Judge McGrath is the administrative judge for the children's court. So we've both served in that position, and the court is there to protect children, to work with the Department of Children and Families, parents, and whatnot, to make sure that children are being adequately cared for. That is to me, a very important function.
And it's important to distinguish with the children's court in the probate court system. What we're really dealing with is avoiding placing children with DCF in foster homes, because what we're doing is encouraging other family members to come forward. Sometimes it's a grandparent, sometimes an aunt or uncle, an older child helping out with a younger child. It's when a parent cannot care for his or her child. And so that's different than juvenile court. Juvenile court is the state of Connecticut trying to take the children out of a home and put them in, most of the time, in foster homes, or sometimes with relatives. In our court, it's a petition filed by like a grandparent, and not the state of Connecticut.
Yeah, and I think DCF will oftentimes, if they know that there's a relative in the family who is available to take care of the child, they will help them. They will steer them towards the probate court.
Yeah, it's awfully traumatic for a child to be placed in a foster home. I mean, to be with family is really important, and we have staff who help mediate those and to help work with the family. I know we're running close to running out of time. One thing I did want to mention before we run out of time completely.
You've got the floor.
Is the I had hoped that this would happen while I was in office. I don't think it's going to. I'm leaving in June next year. But the Windham Town Hall, the third floor of the Windham Town Hall, it's like a stage set for a courtroom, and people just shut the door and walked out 20, 30 years ago. More than that.
Much more.
Much more. And it's an old court room. It's a circuit courtroom, and there's supposedly money being funded to come up with a design to reuse it and to save the historic structure. So that's to be seen, and I won't be there, but the next probate judge hopefully will have the opportunity to work in that facility.
That, too, is a goal of mine. It's been a goal of mine for a long time, and Judge McGrath and I are committed to working together on that, along with State Representative Johnson. It's a shame to let that beautiful, beautiful courtroom upstairs go to waste. It was once actually the Superior Court for Windham County before they moved it out to Putnam when Governor Dempsey was governor. I go back a little farther than Judge McGrath, so I remember it was not in use when I got to town. Yeah. The circuit court was downstairs. Okay. Anyway, Judge McGrath, thank you so much for coming in, and I hope you'll come back again before you leave the court, because I think it's really important for the people of this town to understand your probate court and how it operates and what a great institution it is for protection of people's rights and for quality of life.
Well, thank you, Judge O'Brien, and thank you, Matt, for hosting, putting this together.
I haven't been called Judge O'Brien on this show for a long time, but I appreciate it, John. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll be back next week with another great show. And Democrats, don't forget to vote in the primary.